Survival games put the player in a setting that requires them to manage their basic needs like food, water, and sleep while contending with whatever obstacles the game throws at them. It's a literal test of endurance to see how you think and react to a changing environment, where many of the decisions you make can be the difference between life and death. One of the things that makes survival games so enjoyable to me is how the personal stakes mesh with emergent storytelling. Scripted sequences that take away control are few and far between, if they exist at all. You can play a game 3 times in a row, and odds are you'll have a completely different experience each time. You, the player, are in control of your own narrative. You can go where you want, set your own goals, and engineer unique ways to overcome challenges, but the ever present threat of death looming over you keeps you on your toes. A poorly calculated jump off a cliff, fucking around and finding out the local wildlife, starvation from not rationing your food out properly, or the desperation and malice of other players can and will set you right back to square one eventually. But inevitably, once I progress far enough, mechanics that crippled me at the start become trivial. Progression is the goal, of course, but there's a certain magic to the early game helplessness that I find myself constantly yearning for. I really wanted a challenge. I wanted a game that pushed me to the limits of my resourcefulness and bravery, one that would reward me for being patient and determined, but never put me in a position where I felt immortal. No building my own custom structures, no item farms or mob grinders, no high-speed vehicles or lasers or whatever the hell this is. I wanted a game where the goal was not conquer, win, or ascend, but merely The Long Dark takes place in the fictional region of Great Bear Island off the coast of Canada, after a severe geomagnetic storm crashes your plane. The island's been in pretty bad shape long before you arrived, following a series of major earthquakes that destroyed most of the infrastructure and worsened an already struggling economy. Aptly named the Quiet Apocalypse, ghost towns, destroyed roads, and abandoned mines now dot the landscape. To make matters worse, all technology has ceased to function as a result of the storm. Not even cars or handheld flashlights work normally, sparking to life only briefly during auroras. Wildlife has become unusually aggressive and the weather is extremely unpredictable. Barring zombies, nuclear radiation, or dinosaurs, I can't think of many ways this could be worse. I'll be focusing on survival mode in this video, but the game does have an episodic story mode that gives some extra context to the world and its events. I've also installed the Tales from the Far Territories DLC, which adds a plethora of additional content. Right off the bat, the visuals for this game are fantastic. I'm not one of those realism bad people, but a unique visual style is always appreciated. The game cleverly hides its lower poly models with lovely painterly textures, bringing to mind a watercolor painting or children's book. There is rarely a moment where you're not looking around admiring the scenery. Tutorials are fairly minimal, and the game doesn't give you arrows showing where to go. In fact, you don't have an objective at all. You don't have a compass, and while you do have a map, it doesn't fill itself out automatically. You can cross from one end of a zone to the other, but you'll need to use charcoal to mark your progress. You mostly learn by doing, and doing takes time. There are a limited number of hours during the day, and every action you take consumes some of that time. Repairing your clothes, cooking food, breaking furniture down, and updating your map don't happen instantaneously, so always be mindful of your surroundings. Great Bear can go from clear skies to deadly winds on a dime, and you'll want to watch your meters too. Critically, there's no fast travel system either. If you want to go from Mountain Town to Desolation Point, you'll have to hike through every region between them on foot and will need to prep for those trips accordingly. How much water should you bring? Do you take a rifle or free up some weight by carrying a revolver? Do you have medical supplies for an emergency? It'll be slow going too, as traversal isn't a walk in the park either. Sprinting isn't particularly fast, and there are rope climbs, broken roads, thin ice, and detours you'll need to account for on your travels, along with other threats. A limited carrying capacity forces you to reject your pack rat ways and leave things behind, and you're encouraged to have multiple safe houses stocked up so you can come back to them later. And you will come back. The game has bunkers, caches, and highly valuable items hidden away that'll take you all over Great Bear in your quest to find them all. You may settle on a specific location as your main base, but you'll always eventually find yourself on the road again. Hoarding everything you see early on may result in you hating yourself when you stop by again later in an emergency. In this inhospitable environment, you can never predict when you'll need bandages, water, or firewood. Carrying too much at once puts you in danger of sprains on inclines. A sprained ankle means no running, and a sprained wrist means no shooting. These may seem like minor setbacks at first, but what happens when you need to defend yourself or climb to safety? The weather can turn at any moment, and it's incredibly easy to get lost if you haven't learned the landmarks yet. Fallen trees, cars, boulders, slopes, most things really, can offer some protection from the elements, allowing you to at least start a fire. Unless the wind changes. No matter where you are or how long you've survived, the game never lets you forget that you're at its mercy. The more expired a piece of food is, the more likely it is to give you food poisoning. Dirty water can give you dysentery and parasites. A bad fall can mean everything from ruined clothing to sprained everything to instant death. The game's harshness doesn't just end with you either. In a survival scenario, you'll need to do what's necessary in order to stay alive. But, of course, you're not the only dangerous animal out there. Wolves are numerous and exceptionally bold as a result of the aurora. Flares, torches, or the classic pump it skull full of lead strategy all work. Wolves and bears are pretty easy to avoid if you keep your head on a swivel and a clear line of sight. Moose are courteous enough to warn you before an attack. But Tales from the Far Territories brings one more resident to Great Bear that will thoroughly remind you of your place in the food chain. It doesn't show itself immediately, though its window of arrival shortens the higher your game's difficulty. It inflicts deep wounds that need to be bandaged around the clock lest you bleed out, and leaves you in quite the vulnerable position for that duration by cutting your total health pool in half. You might not see it, but if you find yourself drawing near its territory, you'll most certainly hear it. Even if it never shuts up after that point. While I have a laundry list of ways I would personally change it, the cougar certainly does its job at making my skin crawl. Just being in a region I know it's inhabiting makes me much more jumpy and hyper-aware of my surroundings. It's a good example of how the game masterfully balances being both beautiful and foreboding. During your travels, you'll find the corpses of unlucky survivors that came before you. I loathe every time I have to go through a cave or mine shaft, and my head is constantly on a swivel when I see a bear den. Perhaps the most disquieting of all is, well, just that, the quiet. I'll walk into a home and find fresh meat in the freezer, plates and perfectly good clothing left out in the open, useful medical supplies just left behind. These spaces may be dilapidated, but I always feel like I've just walked in hours or maybe even minutes after someone else has left. I know this is just video game logic, but the suggestion of life that comes with auroras, crackling radios, flickering computer screens, and flashing car lights can make for a pretty unsettling experience. The game's art style and pacing are all great, but the sound design is the real bread and butter for me. Every action you take sounds uniquely satisfying, and even the sound of your footfalls will change depending on what and how much you're carrying. This attention to detail complements the dynamic environmental sounds perfectly. Your location, the time of day, and the weather all affect the soundscape. The soundtrack is unintrusive but flawlessly captures all the peace, loneliness, and anxiety the game can create. For all the praise I've sung for the game, it actually didn't click with me for a long time. I'm used to a much faster pace in my games, and The Long Dark is one of a few that have really tested me, and it took a lot to get used to the slower pace. It doesn't just teach you patience, it drags you kicking and screaming. Starting a fire or repairing clothes all have a chance to fail, making you start all over again, and the game can be incredibly unforgiving when it wants to. It's worth noting that it does come with a cheat death mechanic that you can use up to 3 times, but it carries its own penalties, so a respawn is not a promise of salvation. If you last long enough, and by long enough I mean really effing long, you'll eventually reach a point where all your modern luxuries fail you. Assuming you don't resort to beachcombing, of course. No more firearm cleaning kits means eventually no more working guns. When all the sewing kits and pills in the world are used up, you'll be covered head to toe in animal skins and stuffing your pockets with as much lichen, rose hips, and mushrooms as you can carry. Again, it takes a very long time to get to this point, and I'd wager most players will either die or make a new save before then. But knowing there's a limited pool of renewable resources and limited time to use them really helps incentivize exploration. I think the critical thing that makes The Long Dark special to me is that it doesn't always feel like the game is on your side. It's certainly possible to learn all its ins and outs, but you're rarely, if ever, going to be completely comfortable. I've come to appreciate how much the game forces you to stop and think about your decisions, to make plans and be strategic, to be introspective and allow yourself to slow down and quite literally take things one day at a time, instead of hand-holding and keeping you on rails to the point where it feels infantilizing. A less ambitious title would probably completely skip the curing process for hides and guts, allowed fast travel, or gave you instant stamina regeneration and limitless carrying capacity. It goes without saying that features like this are not inherently bad, and I won't act like The Long Dark is the only good game left in the world. But the decision to take instant gratification and limitless convenience away from the player is one that feels strangely uncommon, especially done well. The game can be frustrating, absolutely, and there's no shame in playing on easier difficulties, but I've often found that a majority of the hardships I've experienced come from me. I'll get too confident on thin ice and fall in, underestimate how long it'll take me to get from point A to point B, or just get cocky and do blatantly stupid shit. Bad luck is bad luck, but I'd say 8 out of 10 deaths all result in some kind of lesson to take with me next time. The Long Dark is one of those games I always eventually come back to. There's something very alluring about it. The pacing and brutality may take some time to get used to, but it forces me to slow down and think, and can be a very comforting and meditative experience. The world is unforgiving and ruthless, yes, but you can never have the bad without the good. Those moments of victory are made all the sweeter for it, and the vistas are pretty outstanding too.